What's up developers, it's Dari here and welcome back to a new video about FilamentPHP, where we're going to see how we could easily make certain select fields depend on the value selected in another select field. Want to see an example? Let's have a quick look. On my Filament dashboard, you will see that I currently have got two resources, the company's resource and the product's resource. If we click on companies, you will see that I have two companies named company 1 and company 2. Once I click on company number 1, you will see that it has a has-many relationship with the clients table, where each company can have multiple clients. Pretty cool, right? Now let's have a look at our second resource, which is named products. And the example could be debatable, but it's more about the actual code rather than the resource model or migration names. Now when I want to create a new product in my application, I have to enter a title, so let's say test 2, and you can see that I have two select fields right here. One for the company and one for the client, which is disabled. And this is happening because we first need to select a company, so let's say company number 1, before you could select the associated clients. And this is pretty cool, right? Since you first need to select a company, which will then activate a client input field, because you can only select clients who are associated with the company you have selected. Pretty cool. Let's get right into it. As always, I have added timestamps to this video, so if you want to skip to a certain part, please feel free to do so. Now the next thing that I would like to do is creating the companies and client resources, since these two are pretty straightforward as well. And in my FilamentPHP course, which I have linked down below, I have covered these steps as well. We first need to navigate back to iTerm. Let's perform a clear right here, since Filament has a custom artisan command for us to generate our company resource and our client relationship resource. We're going to make our first resource, which will be shown in the sidebar through the PHP artisan make filament-resource command, and the resource name is company. Alright, then we're going to add the client resource inside our company resource, since we have a relationship. So let's say PHP artisan make filament-relation-manager, where we need to pass in 3 arguments. The first argument is the name of the resource class for the owner model, which is client resource. The second argument is the name of the relationship you want to manage, which is clients. And the final argument is the name of the attribute that will be used to identify clients, which in our case will simply be name. Now let's hit enter. Alright, as you can see, our relationship manager has been created successfully. So let's navigate back to PHP Storm for a moment. Let's close off our models directory, open our filaments directory, where you will see our newly generated company resource. Now, the first thing that I want to do is changing the navigation icon to, let's say, home-modern. And I want to override one more property, which is the protected static optional int named navigation sort, which I'm going to set equal to 1. Our for method will be quite simple since we only got 2 fields. On our schema, I'm going to use the section component. Then I'm going to chain the schema method to it, pass in an array where we can define our fields. So the first field that I want to define is a text input. I'm going to make the title. I'm going to chain the max value to it of 50. And I'm going to chain the required method to it. Then on the line below, I want to add a second field for my description. So let's say markdown editor, make the description. Now on my schema, I want to chain the column span full method, so I could place them right below each other. And before we navigate to the browser, let's actually scroll down and define the columns as well. So let's say text column, make me the title. The title should be searchable, and the title should also be sortable. I'm gonna add another text column, which is for the description, which is once again sortable, searchable, and it is sortable. Now I want to add one more column right here named, well, it is a text column again, named created_at. We're going to chain the date method to it. It is searchable. and it is also sortable. Actually, one more thing, and that's inside the actions method. Use a action group, make, pass in an array, use the view action. I'm going to use the edit action, and I'm going to add the delete action. All right, now let's navigate back to the browser for a moment. Let's refresh our local host where you will see that companies have been added. Let's create a new company. Let's name it company 1. Let's add a simple description of company 1 as well. Let's say create and create another, because I need a second company named company 2 and a description of company 2 as well. Now let's say create. All right, click on companies, where you will see that they have been added to our table overview. Let's define our relationship right now, which we need to do inside our company resource, where you will see that you have a getRelations method. So right here, let's make a call to our client's relations manager, and let's make a static call to the class. So let's close off our company resource. Let's open our client's resource directory, where you will find one subdirectory named relation manager right here, where you will find a file inside of it, or a class, named client's relation manager. So let's define our client's relation manager right now. Because we have defined the arguments correctly, you can see that our relationship property has been set correctly. Then inside our for method, we have the text input of name, which is required, which has a max length, and I'm gonna add the column span full method to it as well. And then on the line below, I'm gonna define the description column as well. So let's say markdown editor, make a new description, which also needs to have the column span full methods chained to it. The last thing that I would like to do right here is defining the columns right inside of the columns method that is chained on the table object. I'm gonna keep the name. I'm going to define another text column, which will define the relationship. Well, it will basically show the relationship. So let's say company.title. And I'm also going to add the text column for the created_at. And I'm going to chain the date method to it. If we navigate back to our local host, refresh the page, select the first company, so company number 1, scroll down, where you will see that at the bottom, a relationship has been added. So let's create 2 clients right here, which will be associated to company 1. So let's say new client. Let's name it client number 1, a description of client number 1. Let's click on create and create another. Let's name this one client number 2, description of client 2, and let's say create. Right here, you could see the name, company is associated with, and the created at. Now let's navigate back actually, because I want to do the same thing for my second company. Let's add a client. Let's name it client number 3, and the description should be client number 3 as well. It's optional. Let's create another. Let's say client number 4, client 4, and let's say create. Makes sense, right? Client number 1 and 2 are associated to company number 1, while client number 3 and client number 4 are associated with company number 2. Let's focus on the actual work we came here for. Let's navigate to the CLI for a moment, perform a clear, because we need to create one more resource, which is the product resource. So let's say PHP artisan, make me a new filament-resource named product. All right, let's navigate back to PHP Storm. Let's actually close off our client relation manager, and let's open our product resource. Now we're going to define our fields first, and then we will have a look at how we could optimize it. So follow along for a moment. Let's first define the title of our product. So let's say text input, make a title, a max value of 50. It is required, and we need to chain the column span full method to it. Then I want to add 2 select fields for company_ID and client_ID. So let's say select, make a company_ID, We're going to chain the label method to it, where the label is company. And we're going to chain the options method to it, where we need to pass in a collection with the options that we have from our database. So let's go inside the options method. Let's use our company model. Let's use the static plug method, and we're going to plug the title and the ID. This will return an array where the title will be the value and the ID will be the key. Now let's chain one more method to it, which is the required method. All right. Then I want to define another select field, which is for the client underscore ID. We're going to chain the label method to it, which will be client. We're going to chain the options method to it, and the query, or basically the options, will be the same as our company underscore ID, but we're simply going to use the client model right here. So let's say plug, and we're going to plug the name and the ID. I actually don't know why I named it name for client and title for company, but hey, it happens. Now we need to chain one more method right here, which is the required method. And we're going to add a markdown editor for the description, which should also have a column span full to it. And on our schema, we're going to chain the columns method, where we're going to pass in 2, because I want to have my company ID and my client ID right next to it. If we navigate to the browser, refresh it, you'll see that we have added products in the sidebar. Now let's open it. Let's click on new product, where you will see that the design looks pretty cool, right? We got our 2 important select fields. But if we open the client select field, you will see that it is showing all clients, but you only want to show the clients based on the company that we have selected. So let's work on that first. Let's navigate back to PHP Storm, and right on my client ID select, I'm going to chain the disabled method. We're going to pass in a shorthand function. So let's say fn parentheses arrow notation. Inside the shorthand function, so the parentheses, we got to make sure that we pass in the utility class that Filament has created for us named get, and we're going to define a get variable. Now with the use of this get class right here that we have used, you can easily access request input data. So whenever the company ID has been selected, we could use the value inside the client underscore ID field through the get variable right here. Now, what I want to do right here is type hint it to a bool, and then for the value, I want to disable the client ID if the company ID has not been selected. So let's say exclamation mark, use the filled method, which is a helper function that checks if a value exists and is not empty. And the value we're going to check for is our variable get, add parentheses, and we're going to specifically search for the company underscore ID field. If we navigate back to the browser, refresh it, you will see that clients is disabled. Now let's try to select a company. So let's say company number 1, where you will see that client is still disabled. So let's navigate back and let me show you what we're missing right here. In order for this to work and update the content, let's say quote unquote live when clicking, we need to change the live method to the field you want to check on other fields. Now, since our goal is to use the company underscore ID field in the client underscore ID field, we need to add it to our company underscore ID select field. So right under our options, we need to chain the live method. I'm not a livewire guru, but behind the scenes, I'm pretty sure that the live method uses the wire column model, which allows you to bind form inputs to a livewire component property, basically enabling two-way binding. I might be wrong right here, but please correct me in the comments down below if I am. Also, if you Google around, you will probably see a lot of people using the reactive methods. But ever since the release of Filament version 3, reactive has basically been renamed to live. To keep it consistent with Livewire version 3, its new terminology. But you could still use reactive, it's just an alias to live. What we have done right here basically means that any changes made to the form input will automatically update the corresponding property in the Livewire component and vice versa. So let's navigate to the browser for a moment. select a company, let's say company number 1. And as you could see, we have the option to select a client. Well, this option is pretty cool, but it is still showing all clients. And what we actually want is showing the clients based on the selected company. For this, we basically have to use the same utility get class inside our client field. And based on the selected value, we need to make an adjustment to our query. So let's navigate back to PHP Storm and let's work inside the options of our client underscore ID. Now let's get rid of the option that we have, our query. I'll just redefine it in a bit. Let's add a shorthand function again. So let's say fn parentheses arrow notation. Then inside our shorthand function, I'm going to use the get variable again. Then for the value, I'm going to make a call to my client model again. But instead of using the pluck method right here, I'm going to use the static where method. We're going to get all the clients where the company underscore ID column is equal to our variable get parentheses company underscore ID. We're not done yet because this basically returns the entire collection or basically the entire row of a client. But what we need to do is to chain the pluck method on the where method and say that we only want to grab the name and the ID. All right, now let's navigate to the browser. Let's refresh it again. Let's select, let's say company 1. If we then open clients, you will see that we have only the option to select client number 1 and client number 2. And since we have added a live method, we could even change the company by, let's say, company number 2. Open the clients again, where you will see that it has quote unquote live updated the company underscore ID, and we can only select client 2 and client 3. Now there's one more thing that I would like to add, and let me actually show you why first. If we navigate back to PHP Storm, let's get rid of the value that we have inside of our option. Let's actually copy it. Let's add a DD right here and let's output our get company underscore ID. If we navigate to the browser, select, let's say, company number 2 again, you'll see that our die dump has popped up and it has returned back the right company ID. But I'll give you a moment and think about what's wrong right here. So pause the video, think about it, and start the video again so I can explain you what is wrong right here. If we take a look at the return value right here, it is number 2, which is correct, but the value is wrapped inside double quotes, meaning that this is a string. And since it's a foreign key inside of our database, it's actually expecting an integer. So what I always recommend to do in these types of situations, just to be sure, is type hinting it to the right data type. So let's navigate back to PHP Storm. And inside our DD, let's add parentheses right in front of our variable get. And let's add int inside of it to type hint it. If we navigate back to Google Chrome, select company number 1, you will see that our die dump returned back the right company underscore ID, but this time it has type hinted it to an integer. All right, let's navigate back to PHP Storm. Let's get rid of our DD. Let's paste the query that we created before, and right inside of our where method, we're gonna type hint it to an integer. All right, let's navigate back to Google Chrome. Let's refresh the page, and let's try to create a new product. Let's say test product. Company is number 1. The client is client 1, and the description will be test product. Now let's click on create. You'll see that our product has been created, and inside the edit page, you'll see that the company and the client are still selected. If we go back to our table overview, so you'll see that we obviously haven't defined the columns yet. So let's quickly do that. Let's navigate back to PHP Storm. Inside the table method of our product resource, you'll find our table object and columns method. Let's define a text column. For our title, let's define another text column for our company.title, so our relationship, and I want to output the title of it. Let's create another text column for our client relationship and output the name. And finally, I want to output the created underscore at, which is a date. If we navigate back to the browser, refresh the page, you'll see that the title, the associated company and client, and the created_at are all printed out. Now, this was it for this video, where we covered how you could easily make the options of one select depend on the value of another select. I hope you enjoyed the content, and if you want to see more content like this, let me know in the comment section down below so I could create more Filament content. If you do like my content and you want to see more, leave this video a thumbs up, and if you're new to this channel, please hit that subscribe button.